generations of families we know can look down the street or around the corner and see their family lineage. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandmothers, grandfathers, even great-grandparents all tell stories relating to each other, good times and bad, or bringing up reminiscent landmarks like a pier, corner church, a store, a railway, or a house that existed or may still exist down those streets and those corners. Growing up for our family, things were a little different. It may have seemed a little distant or challenging to relate to our friends. We had to go by photos and periodic visits when learning about our family. We had pseudo-aunts and uncles and even a goatee that loved us, offered advice, and made us feel at home. Now that we are aunts and uncles, cousins ourselves, I would think that we may be asking the question of how we got here a little more often. 60 years ago, our mother, Maria, saw an opportunity and made what had to be the biggest and most difficult decision of her life, coming to America. That decision is the biggest piece of how we got to this point and these places, for which I feel we owe her a great deal of thanks. In an effort to add clarity to the photos, details to the stories, and hopefully remove some of the question marks, I would like you to follow along with this timeline of our Schlosser family series of fortunate events.
In the year 1927, fears of great unrest gripped the people of Germany. 24-year-old Wendelin Schlosser left his hometown in Herdorf, Germany, and boarded the SS Columbus in the port of Bremerhaven on July 27th. He arrived in America a week later, and he was reunited with his older brother Alphonse in Worcester, Massachusetts. The idea was to find work and save money for the cost of another ship's passage from Germany to the United States. In January 1929, Wendelin's wife, Helena, at the age of 23, received her ticket to cross the Atlantic on the very same ship as Wendelin did 6 months earlier, and in late January, she arrived in New York City.
The first thing I think of when I think of Alma is the dish of candies that's always by her front door.
Getting milkshakes in those really old cups whenever we spent the night at her house for some reason, whenever Mom and Dad were away.
When we were little and we'd go over and hang out with Oma for dinners, she loved to make us what she called turkey nuggets and shells and cheese. We really thought we were eating turkey nuggets. They were just chicken nuggets, I think, but they would come in like this meat package thing, and she'd open them and microwave them, and then she'd put them on the table, and the shells and sauce, and it was just mac and cheese, but she liked to call it shells and sauce, but it was really good.
Yeah.
And then I'd always make sure and drink out of the little purple cup with the face on it. Alyssa and I, we fought over that cup.
Wendelin and Helena found out in late spring of 1929 that they were due to have a baby. On January 4th, 1930, Herbert Schlosser was born in Worcester, Massachusetts. Herbert was the first of 4 children and the only one to be born in the United States.
We would sleep over there sometimes, and in the spring and in the summer we'd take the sticks like by the creek, and we'd name them like the SS Jenna, or like the like Titanic or something, and we'd throw them in the water, and the creek was always going, so we'd watch them as far as we could go down the road or down the creek, and that was always fun. And then there was like the tulips over there and stuff too. That's what I remember about that.
January 23rd, 1933, Josef and Margarita Schneider welcomed Maria to their family. She was met by our older brother Josef and sister Mechtilda at their home in Derenbach, Germany, later to be joined by Johanna in September of 1934. Back in Massachusetts, as the Great Depression loomed, Helena prepared to return to Herdorf. Because of these actions, Helena unknowingly put 2 of our family's puzzle pieces into place. setting up the canvas that would change the future picture of our family for generations.
Usually, like beginning of December, I would help her put up her Christmas decorations. Her little tree, all the lights, and her house setting underneath the tree. It would take all day. She would feed me, which is always a plus. But she'd pull some frozen cookies, brownies, out of the freezer. She would hand me like a jug of milk that I always check the expiration date first, just cause. Yeah, but no, I always look forward to going over there and helping her.
My parents went to Bristol and NASCAR race, and Molly I don't know how old Molly was, but we'd been to Omaha's before, obviously, to sleep over, and we were all ready to go, and I think this was like this was the first night they were gonna be gone for like 4 days, and Molly would not stop crying. All I can remember is that she was screaming, and I don't even know how old you were, but she was just screaming so much that my parents just were like, well, we're out, and they left because she wouldn't stop crying. Like, I remember like outside, like in her little foyer area, and then outside too, like, because she had to like shut the door, and my parents were trying to leave, and they ended up leaving her, but
Made it better.
yeah, way better. Then we were totally
yeah,
fine
for like 4
I think
nights.
we drove around then, and then we were totally fine after that.
Yeah, I remember that. The rest of the nights, I don't really remember crying.
Yeah,
but
poor
I
Oma,
remember
that's
staying
all I
there.
remember.
Yeah, she handled us. So.
Yeah.
We were alive.
Gwendolyn and Helena returned to Herdorf in 1934 to evade the declining conditions in America. They could not have known what the future would hold for themselves in Germany. Gwendolyn eventually found work at the iron ore mine in Concordia, and their family grew. Years passed, and Maria's brother Josef returned home from war. He soon worked side by side with Gwendolyn, and the two families continued to grow closer. Maria watched over the younger Schlosser sibling, Rita, as work continued in the mine. Maria and Racy, Herbert's sister, found work in the hospital at Concordia, and Herbert learned a trade as a young journeyman mason. Racy and Maria made Sunday walks with Odie and Herbert a priority, and these walks became a large part of growing up for the teens of the two families.
She talked to me about when she got the instruments ready for the doctors, that was her job, and when she met Opa, she talked to me about that, and then she said that he went away and that she saw him at church, and it was like she saw a ghost, and she saw him, and she just explained that she loved her job at the hospital, which was really interesting, working at a hospital, that she was just, I wore the gloves and got everything set up, that was her job, and she loved it. I think in the ER or somewhere, just in a hospital, right? And hearing her talk about how much she loved this job, and that when she saw Opa and he came back and she saw a ghost, and she talked to Opa's family about leaving that job to be with Opa, I think. And so it was really interesting to hear that story, but that's as far back as I can remember, as when she was a child.
February 1953. Having just turned 20, Herbert received word that there is work to be had in Canada. Herbert signed up for a work program which provided passage to Canada in return for providing labor in the farming industry. On March 18th, he boarded the SS Rosa Clume and arrived in Nova Scotia, Canada on March 29th. After completing his work obligation in Halifax, Herbert headed to Niagara Falls, Ontario, and found work as a mason. Here he helped finish buildings on Lundy's Lane. Herbert would frequent the Liederkranz Social Club in Niagara Falls, USA. There he befriended the bartender Andy Newman and his wife Clara. All the while he searched for work and a place to live in the USA.
Oma probably, like, we talk about how slow she is opening gifts. She probably was always like that, but I highly doubt we ever noticed it because we were always just messing around, playing around together, and she just let us do our thing, and she'd always be opening up her gifts, taking her time. Yeah, I didn't notice at the time. As you get older, you notice, but I loved when she would bring out, I think she still does, the albums, like, have those out. Like, that's what it should be about, and then if she has a story, she likes to tell the story of that.
Going through all the pictures.
Christmas. Every Christmas, as long as I can remember, Oma, we will sing Silent Night in English all together as a family, everybody that's there, and then afterwards, Oma will sing Silent Night in German by herself, and everybody watches. And I think that's really cool. Yeah.
October 1954. Herbert traveled across the Rainbow Bridge numerous times. It is assumed that Herbert had utilized his German passport as identification during those trips. But for some reason, on Monday, October 18, 1954, he used his birth certificate, declaring his 14th Amendment birthright as access to the U.S. This decision did grant him access and consequently enlisted him into the United States Army. Herbert was given 90 days to straighten out his affairs. He sent telegrams home explaining his situation, arranged safekeeping for his belongings, and on January 19, 1955, started his 2-year enlistment in the Army at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
She'd come to all of our games if she could.
She came to a lot of the volleyball games. Multiple of them. Even at a trip, I think she came to a couple.
And she would bring the candies, and everyone would get candies.
In the crowd?
Everyone in the crowd, yeah. As far as they could go. Whoever wanted them.
I always remember her going for her must-have 3-mile walk every single day. That was a staple.
One day, it was just a summer day. It was actually really warm out, and I was sitting in my house, and all of a sudden I hear a knock on the door, and it's like 2 in the afternoon, and I opened the door, and it is Oma. She came, and she had a walking stick, and I was like, I didn't see her car, so I was very confused where Oma came from, and she said she just walked through the woods to our house because she lives directly behind us, obviously, and she literally came with her walking stick. She walked. She said it took her an hour and a half, but she made it there. And then we offered her a ride home. She said no, she wanted to walk back. All she wanted was a glass of water. It's literally the only thing she asked us for, was a glass of water. And then she left.
After boot camp, Herbert was mobilized to the U.S. Army base in Hanau, Germany, to assist with the ongoing World War II rebuilding efforts as an interpreter for his commanding officer. Herbert wrote many letters home, and during his opportunities for leave, he would take the 150-kilometer train ride to Herdorf to visit his family in Maria. Maria, now 23 years old, had been promoted to the emergency room of the Concordia Hospital. Although many of Maria's responsibilities were incredibly difficult and emotionally draining, she found it extremely rewarding and was well respected by the doctors and staff. On a spring morning, walking home from church with her mother, Maria would be surprised to see Herbert waiting near their home. The couple talked of how much they missed one another, and eventually talk would turn to the opportunity at hand, going to America with Herbert. After much examining of her conscience and consultations with family and Sister Elfrida, Maria made the biggest and most difficult decision of her life. She would marry Herbert and move to America. On November 24th of 1956, in a civil ceremony, the two were married. Herbert, still having to complete his service, returned to America, and plans were in place for Maria to join him in the spring.
She had to apply to get married or something. Like there was an issue with that because he was American, and it was a big deal, and that they inspected her back then. Like they literally inspected her to make sure she was worthy of being American, right? So I was just staring at her like, they did what?
Do you remember any stories that she would tell you?
You know, I was trying to think, because I know she's told a lot of like over in Germany, and all I can remember is like that, talking to her a lot about like the houses over there and like the roofs and how all the houses are like close together, and the neighbors, it was a lot different than like the house that she's in now, and even in the city, like in Niagara Falls. Like I just remember we would talk about that. I don't know why. Something about the roofs of the houses. I don't even know, but it was something so different from over here.
Well, that's why she likes the falls. She always would talk about how like the neighbors were closer, and then whenever
'cause that's what she was used to. Yeah.
over there.
On January 19, 1957, Herbert's 2-year Army enlistment ended, and with the help of Clara and Andy Newman, he was now firmly grounded in Niagara Falls, New York. Without knowing the English language, the spring of '57 found Maria receiving her passport, a boarding pass, and collecting all of her belongings for the long ship's voyage to America. Boarding the SS America at the port of Bremerhaven in March would mean the potential for rough seas. During her week-long passage, she and her cabin mate would learn how to handle the rough seas and dress properly for dinners. As the ship approached the New York harbor, Maria carefully tied her colorful housecoat to her bag so she could be identified by an arranged guide. On April 3rd, the SS America arrived at the port of New York. Maria, with housecoat and bag in hand, was taken through Battery Park into New York's Grand Central Station for a train ride to Buffalo. April 4th found Clara, Andy Newman, and Herbert waiting at the Buffalo Central Terminal. Soon after arriving in Niagara Falls, the couple ended up in a third-floor apartment on Main Street, which Clara helped Herbert find and furnish for Maria's arrival.
I know, like, she would take the time and, like, I remember we went out to breakfast, Ashley, me and her, after we took her to an appointment. She just told us the whole story about, like, meeting Opa and then coming over here, because we just had, like, an hour to, like, sit down and talk, and it was really nice. And she loves telling stories. I think listening to her stories is always so nice. She has so many details. It's pretty impressive every time.
She has a better memory than I do.
Yeah, same. I don't know how she does it.
Since we can't remember them.
I always tell Oma that she's gonna live forever. I always tell her that she's gonna walk until she's 100, 110, and she goes, "Oh, no, yeah, no, you'll live that long." She's the healthiest woman I've ever seen.
After Maria's difficult long journey from the no-stoplight town of Dernbach to the light-filled city of Niagara Falls, Maria could have rested and felt satisfied in what she had accomplished. But she didn't. Maria took it upon herself to learn the English language, receive citizenship, earn her high school diploma, and much more, all while raising 5 children. We owe a debt of gratitude to numerous members of our family and the fortunate events that occurred during their lives. As we celebrate the 60th anniversary of Maria's arrival to America, we as friends and family fully recognize Maria's hard work, accomplishments, and weighty decision-making. If it weren't for her and all the big decisions she and others in our family have made, we may still be asking the question of how we got to where we are today.